What's up, everybody? Peter Ariz here alongside D Money. This is Group Chat Football Live, our daily show where we talk transfer portal across the country, coaching moves across the country. Of course, it's that time of year, and we say it at the start of every show, D. We have a lot to talk about. But today in particular feels like now a week and a half into the transfer portal. A lot of these guys have had their time to take their visits, have a lot of conversations, take a step back from the initial decision to enter the portal, and decisions are being made.
Yeah, look, Group Chat, we're taking you across the country, commitments, portal, coaching changes, practices. We will keep you up to date. Like and subscribe. We're bringing this to you daily with multiple videos on all the teams across the country, not just the big name programs. So like Pete said, man, a lot to get into today, both on the coaching front and on the portal front. You know, a lot of these moves impact the other. So it's a domino effect to some of these moves that could impact from coast to coast. Something on the Pacific could impact something on the Atlantic and everything in between. So that's what makes all of this so interesting with the new world of transactions.
So we'll start with the West Coast here. The Branch brothers, Zachariah Branch, Zion Branch. Big news that came out yesterday that they would be entering the portal here. And Zachariah, the younger brother, speedster, real weapon offensively, 10.33 in the 100-meter, guy who's 5'10", 175, 47 catches, 503 yards, and a touchdown this year. A couple return touchdowns last season. Dealt with an injury this year, so it wasn't his best output in terms of production. And obviously, it was an up-and-down situation for USC this year. But a guy who's a highlight maker for sure. A lot of fans were excited to see his name when he entered the portal. And then his brother, who was a big recruit in his own right, 6'2", 210, has been a guy who's dealt with a lot of injuries in his career, safety position. These guys, again, social media-wise, they were the first college athletes, college football players, I should say, to sign a deal with the Jordan brand in terms of NIL. So they have that star appeal. We're expecting them to command some money here in the transfer portal. But this was big news when it popped yesterday.
Yeah, you mentioned that Jordan brand. That's an interesting twist just in terms of Jordan brand schools about UNC, UCLA, Michigan, North Carolina with Bill Belichick. That'd be an interesting fit. So few schools out there across the country, but such a talented family. I didn't realize that their great uncle was Cliff Branch from the Oakland Raiders, one of the greats, 10-300, 21-01, 200 meters, long jump 24, triple jump 46, 4 and a quarter. That's the state's best leap that year, in Nevada. So this is a guy who has always been a great athlete, was a 5-star player, a lot of Tyreek Hill comparisons coming out of high school because of the combination of quickness and explosiveness. I agree. I thought he looked a little slower last year at USC. He was involved more in the passing game. He was a first-team All-America returner as a true freshman for USC. This year, more incorporated in the passing game, better numbers in the passing game, but just didn't look as dynamic. It must have been an injury because you know what this guy's capable of when he is full speed. His brother, probably more of a, even though he was a great athlete coming out, another top 100 player, a little older, has battled injuries. He's probably more of a physical safety, Zion, not somebody who's going to be a dynamic, 6'7" INT kind of guy, but someone who'll tackle who's in front of the person who's in front of him, bring him down, and does have some athleticism. But these are guys with the pedigree coming from Bishop Gorman, probably the best program in the country. They're great kids from everything you hear. They started their own nonprofit when they were young kids. I mean, I couldn't imagine doing anything like that at that age. And of course, they have the athleticism. I think both of these guys, the name is probably bigger than the production to this point. But part of that is because they have the athleticism. You've seen the track numbers, you've seen the highlights, and there's more to pull out of them. So whatever school gets these players, and look, Zachariah entered the portal with a no contact tag, which means he kind of knows where he's going or knows where the couple of schools he wants to talk to. Zion didn't. You wonder if maybe some schools are going to recruit both. Some schools will only recruit Zachariah. And if that's the case, are they a package deal? Would they separate? Something to watch for in this recruitment beat, but a couple schools in the mix, according to On3. Miami, they're looking for a slot receiver. They also need depth at safety. Michigan, trying to build around Bryce Underwood. Georgia's been mentioned twice. They certainly need dynamic playmakers all over the field. That's been a weakness for them, even as they won the SEC. Oklahoma needs everything, retooling that roster potentially around John Mateer, the quarterback from Washington State, who's a strong consideration there. Florida trying to build around DJ Lagway. Louisville always in the market for these kind of players. You saw what they did with Isaac Brown, who's a dynamic, smaller running back. But they, Jeff Brom could do a lot with a guy like Zachariah Branch. I believe that is also a Jordan Brand school. Actually, I'm not sure. They're an Adidas school, actually. So maybe that's a problem. So a lot of different schools, a lot of different considerations. To me, what I'm trying to see is, are these guys going to stick together or are they going to separate?
Yeah, Oklahoma's Jordan Brand too. So, yeah, I mean, look, in general too here, when you look at the USC situation, D, obviously not a great year by any stretch for Lincoln Riley out there, but they've had a lot of guys enter the portal, and this isn't a USC only problem, right? Let's make that clear. This is happening at other places, but a lot of high profile entries. Miller Moss on his way to Louisville, Kyron Hudson on his way to Penn State, Bear Alexander. Is that official yet? Is he Penn State? I know he was visiting Penn State. I'm sure he'll take some other trips around.
And hopefully he doesn't get a tattoo like the Georgia tattoo on his bicep.
Right. So you look at the situation at USC. Is there anything in terms of the trend that it's going towards right now that concerns you?
Well, 9 out of 12 top 100 recruits signed by Lincoln Riley have now transferred. What concerns me is you see the tweet from the Branch brothers basically saying, we're entering the portal, we're out of here. And then Damani Jackson, Raleek Brown, who were big recruits that have since transferred out, are tweeting smart man publicly. That's not a good sign. I mean, again, sometimes the people that leave should have left and they're unhappy for a reason. It's not the school's fault that they have those feelings. So just because players that left are unhappy doesn't mean it's something's wrong with the program. Could mean more about the players that left. But with that said, it's not a good sign. You don't like to see that kind of thing. And when it's 9 out of 12 top 100 recruits, that's a particularly bad sign. 6-6 without elite quarterback Caleb Williams kind of carrying that show a little bit. So cause for concern if you are Lincoln Riley. Now you have Husan Longstreet, one of the best quarterbacks in the country coming in. Could he build him up to be that Heisman contender, number 1 overall pick? If he can, that's going to help his career prospects at USC and help the overall trajectory of the program. But that's putting a lot on a true freshman when there's a lot of pieces that you would hope be building block pieces of this program that are now out the door.
Appreciate everyone who's on with us now live, almost 70 live with us. Hit that like, subscribe to this page. I know a lot of you may know D Money and myself, Peter Ariz from Canes Insight. Some of you are asking where the Canes Insight show is today. We'll be going live with Mike Ryan, probably around 2:00 when we wrap this show up. So stay tuned for that on the Canes Insight page. We have not forgotten about you guys. Excited for today's show with Mike. So continuing to go down the list here, and this is, again, I know we got some Canes fans on here now, and this next topic that we're talking about, the next couple ones actually are going to be pertinent to you guys ACC-wise. And the first one here is that Wake Forest quickly has a new coach here as Jake Dickert is hired. And you saw the other day, Dave Clawson, sort of a surprise stepping down, resignation. He's still going to remain with the program. So it's not like there was any sort of scandal that pushed him out the door. It hadn't been a good last couple seasons there. But former Washington State coach is now heading to the ACC. This was his 3rd full year at Washington State, 8-4 record. And guy who took over midway through 2021 when Nick Rolovich, who was just hired as the offensive coordinator at Cal, actually was fired because he did not want to take the COVID vaccine. So he took over in a tough time. There was things were kind of going well for them and they were building in the right direction. And that happened. He steadies the ship. They've had a lot of success the last couple years, Cam Ward coming out of there. Now John Mateer, someone who's out there on the portal, but an interesting move for him coming cross country here.
Yeah, this is a guy who's been around. He's been at the FCS level, Division II, been at, of course, Group of 5 with Wyoming, and now Washington State, sort of both, right? You're in the Power 5, now back to the Group of 5. Had an unbelievable start to this season, 8-1, lost the last 3, but still 8-4 for Washington State. A very challenging program, tough place to win at. Still a heck of a year. It's interesting when you look at Dickert. He's got a defensive background. He's a defensive guy the whole way, but really what he's done great is identify offensive coordinators and also identify quarterbacks. So you look at Eric Morris from Incarnate Word, who's now the head coach at North Texas, putting up a ton of points down there at North Texas. It was a great hire from a smaller school that was not FBS. Then he goes to Ben Arbuckle, one of the youngest offensive coordinators in the country, catches a rising star, does a great job with Ben Arbuckle. Ben Arbuckle is now the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. So he caught 2 guys on the up who then went on to greener pastures, at least financially, right? Quarterback-wise, Cam Ward comes with Eric Morris from Incarnate Word. Cam Ward, Heisman finalist, first-round pick. Hard to get much better than that coming from the FCS level. And then you talk about the current quarterback, John Mateer, who was ranked as the 124th ranked quarterback in America and is now the #1 overall player in the transfer portal, visiting Oklahoma right now. Miami trying to get in there. So even though he's a defensive guy, he thinks outside the box with his coordinator hires, and he's had success on that front, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, and then the quarterbacks that he's identified along with those guys. So if he can take that to Wake Forest, a job that's going to be a lot more challenging in terms of not necessarily the resources, because he's used to working with less resources at a Washington State. It's a tough job, but certainly the schedule is going to be a lot tougher than what you had this year. Now, in the past, he was competing Pac-12. That was different. But now, from this year, going 8 wins to a Wake Forest team that would love to get 8 wins, you're a hero. You're Dave Clawson if you're getting to that 8-win number. It's going to be a lot tougher. They have NIL limitations that he's going to have to work through. But one way you can work around that is by thinking outside the box with your coordinators and getting quarterbacks that are undervalued by others. So if he can carry that over and then maybe bring some of that defensive expertise to get this defense right, I think he's going to be in good shape. Wake Forest wasn't that far away, at least in terms of where they are when they're good in the ACC. They lost a lot of close games. Are they going to be a 10, 11-win team even in a great year? Probably not. But they weren't like a total doormat in the ACC this year. They were competitive in most games. And if you just get them a little more, prove that quarterback position, you're replacing that iconic slow mesh offense most likely, but maybe you get another innovative hire like that that's outside the box that schools that are not Wake Forest are unable to make because they got too much to lose. Maybe now you can get back to where Clawson was, which is a respected program, a team that no one wants to prepare for and play, and a tough out. So it would be an interesting move. I think creativity is going to be the name of the game here for Dickert. And if he just tries to be like every other ACC program at Wake Forest, I think the NIL resources just aren't going to be there for what he needs to do.
And real quick here, just looking at Washington State, kind of what's left behind there right now. The offensive coordinator, as you mentioned, is headed to Oklahoma, or already there in Oklahoma. Head coach, he's gone. You see defensive coordinator gone, QB coach, running back coach, John Mateer, and then 22 other players on the portal. And they have a bowl game coming up here against a good Syracuse team.
Yeah. So that'll be an interesting one. And Pete, by the way, we got some breaking news here. So I'll let you break it. Why don't you go on Twitter? I know you're going to like this one here. This is involving Caden Salter. So I'll let you break the news.
Oh, let's see.
With the tweet. So breaking news for those watching live. We do have a commitment here for Caden Salter that we're about to get to in a second. But Caden Salter.
Wow. Okay, so Caden Salter on his way to Colorado, man. This is a good move, man. I really do like this fit for him.
Colorado obviously has been defined not only by the Heisman Trophy winner Travis Hunter, but by the quarterback Shedeur Sanders. I would argue that in many ways, even though Travis Hunter to me, is the best player in the country, deserved the Heisman. Shedeur was probably the most valuable player to the program when you think about what he had to get through with the offensive line being in turmoil and just kind of carrying that team and being hard to replace. Now, not only do you sign Juju Lewis out of Carrollton, Georgia, a highly touted top 100 player, young phenom, this guy we've heard about since his freshman year in Georgia, one of the best distributors of the ball in the country, a guy that's a Bryce Young, I don't want to say clone, but often comp to Bryce Young. He's probably expected to come in here and start as a true freshman, replace Shedeur Sanders. Now you get somebody like Caden Salter, who has had a ton of success at Liberty, who's been at the Power 5 level previously at Tennessee, goes to Liberty, has a 1,000-yard rushing season while also throwing the ball at a high level. This is a very, very interesting move. And I wonder how that impacts Juju Lewis. Is he going to be cool with it? He's not really the type to come in packages. He's a passing quarterback. He's been playing since he was 14 and putting up numbers. Is he going to be willing to take a seat and get stronger, which might be good for him? Interesting move there. A lot for Prime to manage here.
Dynamic, man. He can really run. The numbers were down. The passing numbers in terms of touchdown passes and yards were down this year. Obviously, you see CJ Daniels right there, who he's on his way to Miami now, as was announced today. So he didn't have him this year. They didn't have the same weapons as the previous season. But he's someone who he's a legit dual threat guy. Obviously, not the biggest guy in the world, but can elude pressure. You see him downfield. He can make people miss. So this is a guy quick release as well. So you get some weapons around him, and we talk about Coach Prime in Colorado needing to continue to build those trenches. This is a nice pickup for them.
Yeah, I think when you look at the drop percentage for these quarterbacks, who had the highest drop percentage, Salter, I want to say, was number 3 overall on that list. And you could see it when I watched his games this season. Not only were the receivers dropping a lot of passes, you could sense some frustration from Salter, which, you know, you might need to rein in, especially with the spotlight that's going to be on Colorado, a lot brighter than what it is with Liberty. So he'll have to manage that. But he's going to have better receivers. So there'll be less drops. Even with Travis Hunter moving on, you got a lot of talented receivers at Colorado. They're in the mix for others. They had Concepcion from North Carolina State on campus this week. So he should have a good receiving core, one of the better receiving cores in the Big 12. And he could still run. He's a 1,000-yard runner no less than a year ago. So very interesting to me. The main thing I'm just watching here is how are they going to handle that dynamic with Juju Lewis? Because Colorado was not signing quarterbacks like Juju Lewis for a long, long time. Now you have a guy who's been a national name since his freshman year, setting records passing in Georgia really since his freshman year. He has the state championship single game record that he set as a freshman. This is Juju Lewis. So I don't see him as somebody who's going to come in and say, I'm good sitting down. Is this going to be an open battle? Is this going to be some situation where Salter's got so much success that he just goes in there and start? Prime's got a lot to manage here, but I'd rather have 2 quarterbacks that I feel good about and have the upside to replace a Sanders than none. So ultimately, you know, this is why Coach Prime is such a compelling figure. He doesn't do things exactly how you expect him to do it. And this is going to be the story with this program. Aside from whether Sanders leaves or not, assuming he stays, this quarterback battle between Salter and Juju Lewis should be one of the hottest ones of the offseason.
Yeah, could be a fun one. And maybe it's something where they implement Juju Lewis in certain packages and use him as well. But like you said, this is a guy, Caden Salter, who entered the portal last year as well. Comes back to Liberty. Didn't have a great year by the numbers, like I said. Still win double-digit games over there. But I think for him to take himself to the next level, obviously it's not as simple as saying you're going to be the next Shedeur Sanders, but he sees that Shedeur is going to be the top pick of the draft, most likely coming out of there. Now, could that help him? Let's see. But good luck to him next season at Colorado.
Yeah, look, the number that's going to be telling to me with Salter, yeah, he ran for 1,000 yards in 23. I'm sure he wants to get some of that back. But in 23, 9.9 yards per attempt. In 24, without CJ Daniels and others, 7.2 yards per attempt. And that explosive passing element, that downfield passing element, and he has the arm strength to do it. Can that return to Colorado? We know that Colorado was explosive this year with Shedeur Sanders. Something to watch going forward.
So probably the story of the last 24 hours in terms of the transfer portal and Twitter, Texas Tech, man, out of seemingly nowhere, the Red Raiders have become big winners and big spenders. You would assume. I mean, I'm not assuming here. The commits and the crystal balls tell the story. So not all of these guys that we're going to go through here are officially signed or committed just yet, but crystal balls starting to pop through for a lot of them. And we're talking about the transfer portal now, D, but it started in this last week when, for example, they outbid a Houston. They just ripped Houston's defensive coordinator right from them. And Houston, not a school that is normally shy about spending money either. So they do that in the coaching ranks. They go get a new offensive coordinator as well, and had an 8-win season under Joey McGuire. So obviously they're saying, let's go reinvest. Let's go in on what we have built. We feel like we've built already here, and take this thing to the next level. Yeah,
the money speaks loudly. You look at not just the guys they're bringing in from a portal standpoint. Look at the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. You get Mac Leftwich from Incarnate Word and Texas State. Big time, creative, highly productive offensive coordinator, hot name. And then Sheil Wood, who you get from Houston. We saw Coach Fritz at the press conference we talked about on one of our prior shows. He was saying that Wood left because of money. That was a money deal. Texas Tech, which is in the same conference as Houston, just spent more money to land Wood. So the money spent on coordinators, you're seeing the same thing in the portal. And look, year 4 for Coach McGuire, 8 regular season wins for the first time since 2009. You got Baron Morton coming back. You got a lot of juice in this program. The difference between where Texas Tech is and where Arizona State is, I don't think is a ton. Of course, Arizona State in the playoff, having a first-round bye. I don't see a huge difference personally between those two programs. So it'll be interesting to see how the whole thing develops. But 4 straight bowls for Coach McGuire, and portal-wise, man, we'll go through the list, Pete.
Yeah, let's just kind of go through these names real quick. We got a lot of guys to talk about, so let's just get right to it. Lee Hunter, him and Jaheim Otis from Alabama, who just pledged his commitment, or I should say signed to Colorado yesterday, were considered the top 2 defensive linemen in the portal. This is a guy who, again, you can't teach a couple things when you're talking about portal. Big interior lineman who can fill space and move a little bit. And then the fact that he's played a couple years, started his career at Auburn, didn't play there very much, transfers to UCF, and really takes off the last couple years. Yeah, we talked about this yesterday with Jaheim Otis, who went to Colorado. These body types are just not something you're going to sign to the Big 12 out of high school, particularly since the majority of these kind of guys are from the Southeast. So they're going to the Southeastern Conference. Lee Hunter, no exception. He's from 8 Mile, Alabama, top 100 recruit. He signed with Auburn out of high school, goes to UCF with Coach Malzahn, does very, very well there. You look at the 2024 campaign, probably his best. 45 tackles, 9.5 for loss, 1 sack, 6 hurries, and the size, man, 6'4", 340. He wears it well. He looks the part of a top 100 player. Again, not dissimilar from Jaheim Otis, who from Mississippi goes to Alabama, now on his way to Colorado. So the way you get those guys on your front line is this way, through the portal. And I think this is obviously a huge get. Florida State wanted to get Hunter. They had the connection with Coach Malzahn. They were unable to get that done. So this is a big, big win for Texas Tech, for a body type and an athlete that you're just not going to get out of high school, and they're hard to come by, period. Talk about a big win. I think this has to be right up there for them in terms of what they did yesterday and are still trying to finalize on some ends. But Reggie Virgil, transfer wide receiver from Miami of Ohio, legit big-time track speed, 6'4", highly productive player at Miami of Ohio. And again, you see the schools that were in the mix there: Oklahoma, Arkansas, Auburn, Michigan, Florida. We had heard Miami had some interest too. Like, you're talking about legit battles that they're winning here. And this is a guy that was highly coveted.
when you bring in a Baron Morton, or you have a Baron Morton, you want to bring in talent around him as a proven quarterback. You want to bring out the best in him, with him coming back to finish his career. So this is a guy that brings the deep threat ability. He was not a big recruit at all coming out of Florida. I mean, I'm pretty in tune with Florida recruits being down here, and I did not hear about this guy. He was 238th ranked recruit in the country coming out with the Mount Dora Christian Academy, smaller school, Central Florida, Apopka, same hometown as Warren Sapp, Brandon Merriweather, some other first-round picks have come out of that area. But he was a good athlete at that smaller level. He ran track, long jump, high jump, hurdles, and also played basketball as well. But then goes to Miami, Ohio, plays mostly special teams. This year completely explodes in a way that was, it wasn't a gradual progression. It was very, very little production and then huge. 41 catches, 819 yards, almost 20 yards per catch and 9 touchdowns. So that linear deep threat. He's 6'4", and he can go up. He does make some contested catches, but he's really very much a long striding kind of deep threat kind of guy. Put him in the Big 12, put him with an experienced quarterback. We'll talk about some of these offensive line additions in a second. He's going to be a very key part of this explosive offense. He looks like a Big 12 receiver just with his ability to run downfield. I think the fit in the conference makes a lot of sense.
And it doesn't stop there. It just keeps going. The next one that we're going to talk about is cornerback Bryce Powell, coming over from Mississippi State. 6'1", productive player the last couple years for Mississippi State, and On3 had him ranked as a top 5 cornerback in the portal.
Yeah, it's similar to defensive linemen, right? The body types and the athleticism at cornerback, it's hard to sign the good ones out of high school because usually guys with those traits are going to the big Southeastern Conference schools, in this case, Mississippi State. So Pollock, 4-star player out of Snellville, Georgia, like you mentioned, 6'1", 190 pounds. That length, that athleticism, hard to sign. He goes to Mississippi State, does well, 72 tackles, 10 passes deflected, a fumble, an INT in 2 years. Considered a top 5 corner in the portal per On3. Look, there's going to be a lot of high-flying offenses in this conference. We just talked about Colorado landing Caden Salter. They're going to be throwing the ball over the place. Arizona State with Levitt is going to be a dynamic offense going forward. If you want to keep up with some of these dynamic offenses, Avery Johnson, he's trying to throw the ball more. Of course, he brings a tremendous running threat. If you want to keep up with some of these quarterbacks in this conference, you have to have corners, and there's no better place to go than the Southeast, and they do so to get a top 5 corner in the portal, which I'm sure was not cheap.
One of my favorite players in the portal, but no longer in the portal because of the rampage that Texas Tech is on here, Cole Wisniewski, who you and I actually talked about him on our Kane show, but this is a versatile player, can play safety, 6'4", about 215, 220 range, ton of production in terms of interceptions, always seems to be around the football, maybe more of a linebacker, but a guy who can really play all over the field for your defense.
Yeah, very versatile. This is somebody who came in to college as a linebacker. No one really expected much of him. Moves to safety, gets 8 INTs. Like you mentioned, 6'4", 218, was on the NFL radar. Battled injuries here this past year, so that slowed down his production this past year. Missed a lot of games, but should be fully healthy. Wants to step up his game going to the Big 12. Interesting to see how he gets deployed. Will he be moving more towards that linebacker position as he keeps up with some of the faster receivers in this conference? Or does he stay as a safety? Do you craft a specific role for him? Shieldwood, that's why you pay him the big bucks, is to play with guys like this and use them in unique fashion. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this player. One of the most interesting watches. He definitely has ball skills. He's definitely a good tackler. Is he a big, Big 12 and those offenses, the way they throw it downfield, seeing him back there, I might try to move him closer to the line and just have him be that coverage linebacker. He's already 218 pounds. You could beef him up a little bit. I don't know what was sold to him. I am sure the Coach Wood had a presentation when he was recruiting him to Texas Tech. So very interesting to see how this guy gets deployed, but he was a hot commodity and a very talented player.
You mentioned the offensive line and what they did there. Hunter Zambrano might be one of the biggest pickups for them on the day. Top-ranked interior offensive lineman in the portal. Legit NFL talk about him before the season, coming over from Illinois State here, and not a sexy position, but to really shore up the inside of that offensive line with potentially one of the best in the country, it has to be a great feeling for that coaching staff.
Yeah, and he'll play tackle, actually, if you believe what he's saying. He's saying he's going to play tackle even though he's ranked as an interior offensive lineman. So we'll see what, again, you don't know what was sold from that Texas Tech coaching staff, but this is a guy, like you mentioned, NFL grades coming in, had some injuries. I watched him in high school, feels like forever ago, because he's from down here in South Florida, went to university school, same school that produced Zay Flowers, Kenny McIntosh for the Seattle Seahawks. So he was around some really good players on those teams. I believe he also had a stint at American Heritage, which was one of the top producers of talent in the country. So he's been around, but he was never, even with all those scouts and all those college coaches going to practice to see who they had, Zambrano was never talked about that way. And I think what happened to him was he's a late bloomer. He had the height. He was always pretty coordinated from what I remember watching him when he was younger. He just didn't have the power that he's since developed by working hard in the weight room and really reshaping his body. So now he takes it to the Big 12. It's going to be a step up at competition for him. But obviously, there's a lot of people that think very highly of him. And I think the opportunity, again, just going by his words, to play tackle in the Big 12 and show what he has there, boost his draft stock if he's able to do so. So that'd be an interesting one to watch. But he's not going to be alone potentially on that offense, because there's other – we've been, so much of the focus has been on defense with this Texas Tech portal, but they are adding some really nice pieces to the offense and projected by Crystal Ball for a few more.
And here's the next one, Howard Samson, who was the starting tackle at North Carolina this year, 6'8", 325. I mean, absolutely massive. Interesting that he's entering the portal. Is this a Belichick decision? It seemed he entered about a week plus ago. So did he already have his mind set on that? But either way, Texas Tech looks like, this one's not official yet, but could be landing an absolute mammoth here at tackle.
Yeah, and look, we don't, like you said, it's not official. With the portal, things change so fast. At any second, he could be going back to UNC or going somewhere else. So we'll watch the situation. But the crystal ball currently on Texas Tech, put him on the other side of Zambrano. Now you have an athletic tackle, then someone who's a little more physical, just a big-bodied dude. Even though he went to UNC and kind of made his name there, he actually is a Texas kid. He's from Humble, Texas, as one of the commenters reminded me. It's not Humble, Texas. It's Humble, Texas. He originally signed with North Texas, played there before transferring to UNC. So Texas kid potentially coming back home, and the size, that's just Texas Tech's going to want to run the ball. We'll talk about that here in a second. This is a guy who there's just not that many body types like this in the Big 12. So you've added somebody like a Lee Hunter, who's a rare body type on the defensive side, potentially adding someone like Samson on the offensive side. That's changing the look of your team. And now Texas Tech, which was always sort of the smarter team that overcame the lack of size and talent against the Oklahomas of the world and the Texas of the world just by being a little craftier. Now, on top of spending money on coaches, you are also getting size, and you might be the bully on the block when it's all said and done in this new Big 12. So that's a very interesting development right there.
And then a couple skill position guys that we'll wrap up with for Texas Tech. I mean, man, again, what a day for them. One that is official here is Terence Carter, tight end, H-back, slot, whatever you want to call him. He's a very, very versatile weapon. And as Cooper Patania from 247 says, Terence Carter's an awesome get for Texas Tech, versatile H-back. It's a fun chess piece. In the passing game, we'll have a Sunday future. Red Raiders are cooking. So this is a guy, again, coming over from Louisiana. Big numbers this past year, 48 receptions, 689 yards, 4 touchdowns. But the number to me that really sticks out here, D, is 14.4 yards per catch, showing his ability downfield.
Yeah, he's originally a Texas guy, right? So he's from Harker Heights, even though he went to Louisiana. And the only thing that tells you tight end is his weight and the way he's used at times when he does play that H-back role. But in terms of the way he moves, the way he catches the ball, he's a receiver. You could tell he's a very comfortable as a receiver. He's not someone that's becoming more of a receiver. He is a natural receiver. He's comfortable running routes. He's comfortable catching the ball with his hands. He can run after the catch. Basketball player in high school, again, in Harker Heights, Texas. So very fluid. And I think this is going to be a receiving weapon in the Big 12 right away. Nothing about this guy screams developmental. I think you're going to have a role for him right away, clear design of how you're going to use him. And you have a veteran quarterback who can get him the ball. With 689 yards, 4 touchdowns, I could see him replicating that production, but he does have competition for targets. So this offense is really, really shaping up to be a balanced group. You add the deep threat in Virgil, you add the move tight end intermediate threat in Carter. You got some guys in house. You got the veteran quarterback. You got potentially the set of tackles with Zambrano and Samson. And then all it's missing is the running back to replace that phenomenal running game that you had this year. And looks like that might be coming soon.
Yeah, as you see right here, Pete Nakos from On3 yesterday put in a prediction for Roman Hemby from Maryland, a guy who has been highly, highly productive for the Terrapins, has rushed for 2,300 plus yards in his career, 22 touchdowns, and he ends his Maryland career tied 4th most in total touchdowns with 27, 8th most rushing touchdowns, and 11th most rushing yards. This is a big back, man. This is a 6 foot, 205 plus pound back. As I'm going to show you some clips here of him, but he's got some speed as well, D.
Yeah, and this is a position that, again, big shoes to fill. You have Taj Brooks, who's a 1,500-yard rusher this year for Texas Tech, one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in Texas Tech history. So a lot of shoes to fill, but you have a very good system to run, plus you're adding offensive linemen. So Hemby's somebody that I've always been a fan of. I'm surprised. When I saw his name in the portal, I was just surprised that he was still in the game. I thought he might be in the pros by now, trying to move on to that phase of his career. But, of course, NIL money can change the calculus a little bit. He's someone with speed. He's a track guy in high school. I believe he was a verified 4.6 in high school. That's usually a pretty good sign of maybe 4.4-ish, high 4.4-ish speed once you get the training and years of physical development on. He certainly plays in that high 4.4, 4.5 range. He's explosive Big Ten back. Maryland's offense took a step back this year because of the departure of Tagovailoa. I think he is somebody that go right into Taj Brooks' spot. I don't think he's going to replace the production, but the overall offense can remain balanced when you add someone like this, who's a proven back, who knows what it's about. He's been in the Big 10, so the Big 12 is actually a step back. Sometimes you see these backs go up in competition to prove that they can play. This is a guy who's been probably playing better competition in the Big 10 than he'll face in the Big 12. So he might want to show his explosiveness. He was somebody that didn't have a ton of explosive runs, despite being a faster back, an explosive back. The team just didn't had that kind of dynamic running game. So I think he wants to show that he can make those big runs, and he had that breakaway speed in a more wide open conference, and a system that obviously knows how to use tailbacks, as they showed last year with Taj Brooks.
And we always talk about quarterbacks when they're going through their process. They look at the offensive line. Running backs are the same way. Just looking at his stats, he had in 2022 as a sophomore almost 1,000 yards, 989, but 5.3 yards a carry. And then the last 2 years, 4.8, 4.5. You'd probably think that he wants to get back over that 5-yard mark, yard per carry mark. And with the additions on the offensive line, that has to help his decision-making process. So what a day for Texas Tech. And look, again, a couple of these still have to be wrapped up and made complete here, but it looks like things are definitely on the right track, without a doubt. Once again, thank you to everyone who's on with us live here. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel. This is Group Chat Sports, Group Chat Football Live, our daily show talking about transfer portal movement, coaching movement, and we have a lot more to talk about here today, as we're kind of in the middle here, but a lot of stuff to talk about, D.
Yes, let's focus on Florida State, because Florida State has, of course, had a new defensive coordinator. There's a lot of new stuff at Florida State, but I find with the defensive front in particular, they're really trying to change their identity. That was something that you thought going into the season was going to be a strength for the Florida State program. We all remember watching that Georgia Tech game, Pete Thamel saying, hey, I talked to some some scouts, they think FSU is the best front in the country. Nick Saban basically saying the same thing. Massive disappointment on the season. So what happens? You get a new defensive coordinator, you get a new defensive line coach, both from Nebraska, Coach Knight and Coach White, and then you start reshaping the way this thing looks with their new 3-3-5 defense. So a lot of moving parts with FSU. I think it was a necessary move to move past the disappointment of last year and start it up front on the defensive side.
And you see on the graphic here, 2 big pickups in the trenches for them. One on the offensive line with Gunnar Hansen from Vanderbilt, and then defensive end James Williams in Nebraska. But before we even get into those guys, there are a couple big notes when you talk about up front when it comes to Florida State. One of them being Daryl Jackson returning, someone who's been at Maryland, who's been at Miami, had to sit out at Florida State a couple years ago because of his transfer situation. But you're getting him back, a guy who has NFL type ability, was a disappointment this year, one of those disappointments that you mentioned, but comes back and is a really nice piece for the center of that defensive line, as you'd expect him to come back motivated after the disappointing year, trying to get his draft stock back where he feels like it should be. On the other end of the spectrum there, Patrick Payton, veteran defensive end, edge guy, enters the portal. This is a guy from Miami Northwestern, huge historic program down here in Miami, has had a lot of sacks in his career, 16 sacks, 109 tackles, 32 tackles for loss, had 7 sacks back in 2023. So had a really good year, the year they made that run, entered the portal last year. NIL situation, ends up rejoining the team. Seems like he was happy at the time with how things had worked out, but comes back to Florida State. A lot of Florida State fans, just seeing stuff on social media and stuff, said that there was a lack of effort at times this year, but that seemed like an issue across the whole team, I will say. This is a guy now entering the portal who is highly, highly talented. Again, draft stock, not where he wants it to be. So could be a big option for a team out there.
Yeah, I think, again, you go back to the change in philosophy, the change in the system. You have the complete shift to now a 3-3-5 defense. If you look at the areas where FSU was most porous last year, run defense, third down defense. These are strengths of Nebraska last year under Tony White with this 3-3-5. Very deceptive. You don't know where guys are going to line up. You don't know which guys are going to drop into coverage. You don't know where. It's very hard to predict. It's a very fluid system. So he's looking for players with length, players with versatility. And I think one thing that you're seeing just from the initial moves is you're looking for guys with physical toughness to stand up. Now, with Payton, I've watched him since he was in high school. He was a guy that was a safety, 6'5" safety, similar to Greg Rousseau in that way. A lot of comparisons to Greg Rousseau, who went to Miami and is now with the Buffalo Bills, one of the best defensive ends in the nation, in the country, at the NFL level. Payton was comped to him a lot because he was a 6'5" guy, moved down, had a lot of sacks. I think he had like 12-plus sacks, maybe more than that. He led Dade County in sacks as a senior, blew up. FSU was able to get him. He had early success in the ACC as a pass rusher. But the effort against the run this year was, abysmal. It was a big reason why FSU struggled so much in that department. And when one of your players that you're investing a lot of resources in is so apathetic in that part of the game, to me, I'm curious if this was someone that they try to keep or if it's someone they pushed out. And that's something I guess we'll find out as time goes on. Obviously, we'll talk about some of the moves that they've made to fill that edge position with a guy like James Williams, much different profile than Patrick Payton. But clearly they valued Daryl Jackson and what he brings as an interior rusher more than what you get from Payton as a rusher on the outside. And I think that makes sense. It's a lot more rare to get the interior pressure that Daryl Jackson gets, top 10 in the country as far as defensive line pressures, that even with the inconsistency that he can bring, he's just more unique in terms of his tools. And then the edges you're trying to get, and we'll get to with James Williams here in a second, are going to be guys with high motor, length, some size to them, not just the 230 guys, maybe 250, 260 type guys, and that versatility you want up front. So Clear that FSU is trying to move past what they had last year on their front while retaining what they thought was working for them, which was Daryl Jackson.
You referenced the guy who might be replacing him here, James Williams, coming over from Nebraska. He's had an interesting journey. Iowa Central Community College, was a walk-on at Nebraska, where he's a 6'6", 250-pound edge who had a lot of production this year, 7 sacks and 7.5 tackles for loss. This is a guy who, just looking at the frame, man, has the NFL length, and coming over with familiarity with defensive coordinator Tony White and defensive line coach Terrence Knighton, who obviously have been a big part of his development.
Yeah, he called Knighton like a father figure to him. So that's just an obvious connection there. We talked about the issues in this past offseason, meaning the offseason before the 24 season, with FSU's defensive line and the NIL negotiations, and then the disappointment that followed on the field. This is sort of, to me, taking a whole different approach where you're saying, all right, this is a former walk-on that went the community college route and really worked his way into being potentially an NFL draft prospect with the arrow pointing up. So the attitude is different. He considers Pot Roast Knighton to be a father figure. He said that. So, you don't want to let down a father figure like that with your effort. He's a high effort player. Still raw, but you've seen flashes. Spin move to end the game against Rutgers. Just an unbelievable play on that strip sack. Shows the athleticism. These walk-ons, particularly from that part of the country, it's like Nebraska used to live with guys from Missouri and Iowa and then Nebraska, turning those guys into first-round picks. Guys like that tend to develop a little later. They're tall, they're big, and they learn as they go. So this is someone whose best football may be ahead of him. He's got 2 years of eligibility. But I think more than anything, you're seeing Tony White, Pot Roast Knighton, reshape that defensive front into their identity. This is you mentioned when you were watching his film, Pete, he was dropping back into coverage, right? He was rushing, doing a lot of things that are confusing in this 3-3-5 front.
And he was not the only player that they picked up in the trenches, other side of the ball. But regardless, Gunnar Hansen comes over from Vanderbilt, ton of experience for him, 37 games started in his career. So Florida State's offensive line was one of their biggest issues this season. Although the Florida State fans would tell you they were experienced coming into the season, there's more to it than that. But Hansen, a guy 6'5", 325, played a ton of football for Vanderbilt in the SEC, was named SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week and Outland National Player of the Week this season as well.
Yeah, someone I've watched since he was in high school. I remember seeing him at a camp when he was very much an under-recruited player out of St. Thomas. Big, wide body, good feet. Really turned it on at that camp. Ended up getting the SEC offer from Vanderbilt and going in that direction. But he's certainly a late blooming type of player. Always been a big guy, and athletic. But sometimes those guys take a little bit to all come together. So goes to Vanderbilt, plays his best football this year. SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week after they beat Alabama, like you mentioned, Pete, and somebody who can play at tackle at the SEC level. You probably like him inside just based on his body type, but the arrow's pointing in the right direction. His best season is probably going to be his next season based on his trajectory. Still, again, he was not someone who came into college physically ready to go, but he still played early, and the starts speak for themselves. And those are high-quality SEC starts. So I think this is someone's going to provide an instant upgrade. Again, you talk about 37 starts in the SEC, man. I mean, that experience is invaluable. Usually guys that start that much games are either graduated or they're in the NFL. So to get a guy like that and bring him into the ACC to an offensive line that had his struggles last year, one of the worst in the country, again, kind of like not as talented as a defensive line, but similar disappointment, right, given what you expected before the year. So to add a guy like Hansen who's got a lot to prove, he wants to show that he's an NFL-type player, chip on his shoulder kind of guy. I like the fit. Question with him, is he going to be a guard? Is he going to play tackle like he did at Vanderbilt? They'll sort that all out, but good to have someone who has versatility and who's gone against the best pass rushers in America.
All right, as we keep things in the ACC here, Boston College with a very interesting pickup over the last 24 hours here. Dylan Lonergan, quarterback from Alabama, transfers to BC. This is a guy that Bill O'Brien actually recruited to Alabama when he was still there a couple years ago, originally from Snellville, Georgia, just northeast of Stone Mountain there. He was a big time baseball prospect, big arm, has some athleticism. He reminded me a little bit, just looking at his background and his story, of Davis Mills a little bit. Davis Mills was the highest rated quarterback coming out of high school from the Atlanta area there, but similar size. Mills maybe an inch or so taller. But you look at the schools that recruited both of them. Who were the finalists for Dylan Lonergan? It was Stanford and it was Bama. Davis Mills, it was Stanford and it was Bama. I see a similar profile there. Big arms, good athletes, and Davis Mills has made a pretty nice career of it here. So that's just something I thought was interesting. I'm going to pull up his huddle tape here. Obviously someone that Bill O'Brien really liked coming out of high school, because he was going to have him come play for him at Bama.
Yeah, very interesting. And it's very interesting when you look at the trajectory of Boston College, right? So Castellanos last year, meaning 2023, sort of the star of the show. Everybody's excited about him. This year with Bill O'Brien, it didn't click the same way. The switch to Grayson James, who's more of your traditional player, and you finish 4-1 down the stretch. So now you go and get a quarterback in Lonergan, who, of course, O'Brien likes. He recruited him to Alabama. He thought he could play at that level, which means he thinks he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country coming out of high school. Somebody who he already thinks fits his system. Does Grayson James have a stranglehold on the job given how you finished? You still got to play Nebraska in the Pinstripe Bowl. This could potentially be an 8-5 season for Boston College, which is exceptional. Does Lonergan have a shot to start next year? Is that something that was sold to him? He clearly wants to play right away, but I think, like you mentioned, the athletic ability is underrated. He's not going to remind you of Castellanos in terms of the way he runs, but compared to maybe your typical Bill O'Brien quarterback that you picture in your head, that sort of drop back passer, he can move. And then, Bill O'Brien did have a lot of success with Deshaun Watson. So maybe I'm pigeonholing him too much as far as just that mechanical drop back guy. But this to me is someone who you let go a little bit. He can run around. He can make things happen. He's a baseball player, touching 90 on the mound as a freshman. Cold weather guy too. He has a strong arm. He's originally from the north, or sorry, his dad's from the Penn State.
His dad played quarterback at Penn State, actually.
Right. So he has that kind of northeast style to him, even though he is from Georgia, just because of the size, because of the way he could throw. And I think he'll be a fit in that cold weather, where you can't just be one of these guys that's accurate with a weak arm, because the wind will kill you and the cold will kill you. This is somebody who can cut through it with a strong arm. I'm not comparing him to Matt Ryan. You said Davis Mills. I think it makes a lot of sense in a best case scenario. But just that type where you have some size to you, you have some arm strength to you, and you're not so dependent on perfect conditions to throw the football.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that whole situation at quarterback plays out. The Grayson James, who started his career at FIU, I knew some people involved, some people on the coaching staff there at FIU, and they were very excited about what his career could become. Thought that he had a lot of development still left, on the bone for him, and he got his opportunity late in the season. Looked pretty solid for sure.
Yeah, that'll be a battle. And look, these are the questions you want to have at Boston College. Their quarterback situation this year, when you consider what happened with Castellanos and just the uncertainty of it, quitting in the middle of the season, that's tough. If you have a chance to win 8 games with that kind of disorder, you're in pretty good shape for your first year at Bill O'Brien. So curious to see what he decides to do going forward, because the next quarterback is certainly going to be much more of what he wants this program to look like.
All right, taking a look at a program now that we're very excited about. And shout out to all the UNLV fans who have, discovered this page and been showing us love. We're going to keep talking Rebels, man. We're excited about the future of that program with Dan Mullen in charge. And we've seen the program be very ambitious in some of the moves they're making here. As Dan Mullen is the highest paid coach in school history, and you see them now going to make this move to go get Zach Arnette as their defensive coordinator, former Mississippi State head coach, came after Mike Leach after his passing, took over, was there for a year. Things didn't end well there for him, but actually was at Ole Miss this last year as an analyst, accepted the job at Appalachian State as their defensive coordinator. And quickly thereafter, Dan Mullen comes in and swoops in and gets him as his defensive coordinator. To me, man, I think it just goes in line with what we're seeing with UNLV and their commitment towards the program right now, D. I look back a few months ago when the whole Matthew Sluka situation emerged, and I don't think that situation put UNLV and their program in the best light. But I think they've responded very well to it. They kind of took offense to people saying, man, what's going on over there? These people don't know how to work in the modern era of college football, in the NIL era. And I think that they've kind of gotten everyone on the right foot here, going towards the right direction and understanding, look, we've got to be better, because some of these moves they're making are very intriguing.
Yeah, look, Appalachian State, to me, they've been one of the signature programs of the G5 ever since they moved up from the FCS level, where they beat Michigan in the Big House. So it's not like they're plucking somebody from a lowly school at that level. They're plucking somebody from who you would think would be a peer or maybe even above them in recent history, right? So that shows you that they're spending money. Football Scoop said unprecedented financial commitment to assistant coaching staff and NIL resources. So you're seeing, it's not just talk, you're seeing the results and the fit here with Arnette. He's from the Southwest. He played in New Mexico. He spent a year at Ole Miss as an analyst, so he's seen the Southeastern Conference game a little bit, but really cut his teeth there. He coached, he's a defensive coordinator in the SEC for Mike Leach. So again, SEC experience, but a background that's much more similar to what you're dealing with at UNLV, coming from New Mexico as a player and growing up there. So you have seen big-time football with Arnette, and now you're seeing ability to adapt at a school with less resources, although relative to your peers, you got a lot of resources. When he was at San Diego State, Arnette had the 4th ranked scoring defense in the country, 13.8 points per game. So if you're drawing up a hire, somebody who's seen the absolute best in college football, which is the Southeastern Conference, someone who is not necessarily local or an alum, but you're in the neighborhood, right? And someone who's had success at the G5 level as a defensive coordinator while also having success at the SEC level as a defensive coordinator. To me, just a perfect fit, and someone who's young, who's got energy. And Mullen's not going to be meddling with the defense. Mullen's an offensive guy. He's going to let coach do his job. Arnette's going to be basically the head coach of the defense, which I'm sure is what he wants. I'm sure that was part of the negotiation. And if he can get this defense looking like San Diego State was looking, or even like how those Mississippi State defenses were looking, and Mullen does what he did when he was at Mississippi State and Florida and get this offense cooking, I don't see why this team, with the right quarterback, which again, I expect this team in the portal to be outstanding just for the near future and for the foreseeable future, I don't see why they can't be competing for a playoff spot every single year under the current format. It's just such a good fit with Mullen, and now a great fit with Arnette.
So kind of keeping it on the UNLV theme here, as Dan Mullen comes in as an offensive guy, you expect him to run his own system. Brennan Marion, their former offensive coordinator, is taking the head coaching job at Sacramento State. We actually spoke about this program yesterday as we were talking about Mike Vick's head coaching opportunities. He's now the head man at Norfolk State as that became official. But Brennan Marion, this is a name that's been a very hot topic in coaching circles the last few years, the creator of the go-go offense. So we'll talk about the offense in just a minute here, D. But this is someone who's coached at Pitt, Texas, worked with guys like Xavier Worthy, Jordan Addison when he had his incredible season there. So again, was in the mix, has been in the mix for a lot of different opportunities, but lands the head coaching job here at Sacramento State.
Yeah, and there's not much new, right? Brand new in college football at this point, but this is something that's totally new, right? There's really no father to this style. When you look at this go-go offense, I guess you could call it triple option, a predecessor, but this is out of the shotgun. So it's just so unusual to have, especially as you get more towards past, air raid, Mike Leach, all that everything that's come from that tree. Now you're going in the total opposite direction to the triple option tree and making it modern. So this is a team that runs the ball a lot, or that did run the ball a lot at UNLV. I'm sure he's going to implement the same offense here at Sacramento State, and maybe even more so because he has no head coach telling him to slow it down. But you're seeing up to 7 offensive linemen on the field at a time. You're seeing 2 running backs next to the quarterback like a sidecar. You are seeing them throw the ball down the field when they need to. Marion is a wide receiver by trade in his past. He was going to go to the NFL, got hurt, so he likes to throw the ball, but he does it out of this very old school meets new school formation out of a triple option. So just very, very interesting to watch him play. He beat UNLV as the OC of Howard as a 45-point underdog, biggest upset, one of the biggest upsets in modern history. So look, Sac State's talking about the resources, that $50 million NIL,
commitment, yeah.
the rise of athletics. The president was talking about the rise of athletics there. So they're talking a lot, but listen, this is a bold move as you head into FBS to say, hey, we are going to do something different, and we're going to hire somebody who is known for being different. Very much fits in with what they're saying they want to do, making a splash. And I hope it works, man. And I'm curious to see how this offense works when it's getting recruited to. Because now Marion, assuming he's going to be here for a couple of years, I'm sure he's eyeing bigger jobs down the road. Young, ambitious guy like this, you got to assume that. But if he has a chance to, with the portal too, to build this offense the exact way he wants as the head coach, now you'll really see everything that's in his brain on the field. And I'm curious to see what he comes up with, because what he did at UNLV was extremely unusual.
And it has been a banner day for the Nick Rolovich coaching tree, as Ohio has their new head coach. Brian Smith has been named the Bobcats' new coach. And this is a guy who, as I mentioned a moment ago, previously was at Hawaii and Washington with Nick Rolovich, and he is the 30th coach now in Ohio history.
And the best period in Ohio history, right? You got 3 10-win seasons in a row, 30-10 the past 3 years. You just won the MAC title, the first since 1968, 38-3 over the Miami Redhawks. So, you know, this is a high period in Ohio football. So it makes sense that you want to keep the pipeline going. You know, you lose your head coach, Coach Albin, to Charlotte, which interesting move. I thought that might be more of a vertical move than what's a lateral move. I'm sure there was financial reasons for doing it for Tim Albin, but keep the same thing we're going. This is going to be a run-based attack for Ohio. They led the MAC in points, but also in rushing yards. Was one of the best rushing attacks in the nation. Top 12 against FBS opponents in both rushing yards per game and yards per attempt. Of course, Parker Navarro, who he got a lot of fame when Timothy Chalamet was shouting him out during the college game day. He's one of the best running quarterbacks in the country. Because you have to replace that production, but similar scheme. You're going to be you're going to be a destination for running quarterbacks here at Ohio with Brian Smith in charge, knowing that he's going to incorporate that aspect of the game. You mentioned the Rolovich coaching tree. A lot of people thought that he was going to get the job at Hawaii, that eventually went to Todd Graham. And, you know, it might have worked out better if you stayed within that Rolovich tree, because like you said, that Rolovich tree has been going very, very well. Only 44 years old. Very curious to see how this goes. Ohio's in their glory days right now. You'd like to see that thing stretch out. And maybe this becomes sort of a niche for running quarterbacks that want to continue to run for 1,000 yards, right? Like maybe they did in high school, and they say, all right, I don't, you know, I'm not going to be an NFL quarterback. Let me run the ball and have some fun and make some plays. Go to Ohio. Until
they do that, and one of these bigger schools come calling, unfortunately, right?
Well, look, that's the thing. If you have a unique offense, maybe, you know, big schools don't always want a quarterback that's run first, right? So you could be the home for those run first quarterbacks. Then maybe their passing is not, you know, SEC or ACC quality, but their running is, right? Instead of switching positions or whatever they might want them to do at the higher levels, they can be the quarterback at Ohio, compete for MAC championships, put up big rushing numbers, and you know, still throw the ball. So maybe that's the niche. Maybe they become, maybe if some of those guys sign with bigger schools out of high school and they don't throw well enough to be the starting quarterback at Auburn, or, you know, you name the school, Michigan, whatever it is,
right,
they come down to Ohio and they can run the ball. So that's an interesting fit going forward. Trying to keep the thing going, man. 10-win seasons are hard to
That's
come
tough.
by.
3 in a row that's amazing.
They've only had 2 since 1962 until this 10-win season stretch. So they're trying to keep it going there at Ohio.
Man, what a show today. We had a lot to talk about. We appreciate everyone. We had great numbers today on the live with us, so we appreciate that. We picked up some subs during the show. So again, if you're just joining us now, we talked all the movement in the portal and coaching wise across the country today here on Group Chat Football Live. As we do every day, we're going live every day, talking all this stuff, and it's picking up more and more now, man. These decisions are starting to get made. More names are entering the portals. We've still got 10 days plus for these playoff teams that there will be movement there as well. But I'm excited, man. This is things are happening.
Yeah, you won't miss a thing. Like and subscribe. This will be your transaction hub every single day of the year. Recruiting. Right now it's portal and coaching. Eventually it's going to shift to recruiting. Eventually it might shift to just, spring practice movement and guys moving up the depth chart. We're going to keep you up to date with everything you don't find anywhere else, the stuff that's not on every single show. We like to keep it here covered on Group Chat Football Live. See you tomorrow.